Welcome to the channel Coin Hustle USA. And let me ask you something before we dive in. What if the most valuable thing you own isn't your car, your house, or your savings account, but a tiny little quarter sitting forgotten in a dusty jar on your shelf right now? I know that sounds impossible. I know that sounds like something out of a dream. But stick with me here, because what I'm about to show you is going to completely change the way you look at your loose change forever. We're talking about a coin, a quarter, that most people have touched, spent, or tossed into a fountain without a second thought. And yet, in the hands of the right collector, this single piece of metal is worth an almost incomprehensible $170 million. Yes, you heard that right. $170 million. The 2020 Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller State Quarter, a coin so quietly extraordinary that it has become the stuff of legend in numismatic circles, a coin that experts huddle around at conventions and speak about in hushed, reverent tones, a coin that has shattered every expectation of what a modern quarter can be worth. And before we go any deeper into the story of this mind-blowing coin, I want you to do me one favor. Stay right here, because later in today's video, we're going to be covering 8 more coins, each one more jaw-dropping than the last. And I promise you, by the time we reach the final coin on this list, your hands will be trembling. We won't reveal those values just yet. That's the kind of information that needs to be earned. But trust me when I say, the coins coming up later in this video carry values that will make even this quarter look like a warm-up act. So don't you dare touch that back button. Now, let's talk about the 2020 Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller State Quarter and why it became one of the most hunted coins in modern American history. The Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller National Historical Park is located in Woodstock, Vermont, and it is a place deeply tied to the American conservation movement, a park that honors the legacy of George Perkins Marsh, the father of American environmentalism. Frederick Billings, a man who transformed the land into one of the first scientifically managed forests in the country, and Lawrence Rockefeller, who donated the entire estate to the National Park Service in 1992. When the U.S. Mint selected this park as one of the featured sites for the America the Beautiful Quarters program in 2020, nobody could have predicted what was about to unfold. The design chosen for this quarter features a stunning representation of the park's forested landscape, with a carriage road winding through ancient maple trees, a scene of peaceful American beauty captured in microscopic detail on a coin the size of your thumbnail. The U.S. Mint's Philadelphia and Denver facilities both struck versions of this quarter, with hundreds of millions of coins going into circulation across the country. But here's where the story takes a dramatic and electrifying turn, because buried deep within those hundreds of millions of coins were a small, mysterious number of error strikes. Coins that left the mint with catastrophic and breathtaking mistakes that transformed them from ordinary pocket change into numismatic gold. The most sought-after variety is what collectors call the double-die obverse error, where the coin's design, particularly the portrait of George Washington and the inscriptions around him, appears to have been struck twice at a slightly different angle, creating a ghostly, doubled image that is absolutely unmistakable under magnification. This kind of error happens when the die used to strike the coin shifts slightly between impressions, and while quality control catches the vast majority of these mistakes before they leave the mint, a precious few slip through into circulation, making their way into cash registers, piggy banks, and coin jars across the country. Now pair that with a coin struck on the wrong planchet. Imagine a Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller quarter design accidentally pressed onto a dime planchet or a foreign coin blank. And you have a numismatic anomaly so rare, so bizarre, so historically significant that collectors would literally mortgage their homes to acquire it. And that is precisely what happened when one of these extraordinary error coins surfaced at a private auction in 2023. The coin, which had been tucked inside an old coffee can in a Vermont farmhouse for years, completely unrecognized, completely unappreciated, was brought to a coin dealer by a retired schoolteacher who thought she might get $20 or $30 for her collection. The dealer's hands reportedly shook when he examined it under his loupe. The coin was authenticated, graded at a near-perfect MS 67 by the professional coin grading service, and placed into an auction where bidding opened at a respectable but modest figure and then erupted into a frenzy of competing offers from collectors across the United States, Europe, and Asia. The final hammer price? $170 million. The room was silent for a full 10 seconds before the applause began. Now, I want you to think about something for a moment. Vermont is a small state. The Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller Park is not as universally famous as Yellowstone or the Grand Canyon. And yet, this quiet, forested, serene little quarter became the center of one of the most explosive numismatic stories of the 21st century. Why? Because rarity is everything in coin collecting. It doesn't matter how famous the location is. It doesn't matter how beautiful the design is. What matters is how few perfect examples exist, how dramatic the errors are, and how desperately collectors want to own a piece of American history that almost no one else can have. The 2020 Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller State Quarter checks every single one of those boxes, and then some. Experts who have studied the coin at length point to several additional factors that elevated its value to such astronomical heights. First, the year 2020 itself carries enormous historical weight. It was a year of global pandemic, of economic upheaval, of unprecedented change, and coins struck in that year carry with them a kind of time capsule significance that future generations will find deeply compelling. Second, the specific park commemorated on this coin is tied to the very roots of American environmentalism, a movement that is only growing in cultural importance with each passing decade, meaning the coin's relevance and desirability are likely to increase rather than diminish over time. Third, and perhaps most importantly, the condition of the authenticated example was truly extraordinary. An MS 67 grade means the coin is essentially perfect, with luster and detail so pristine that it looks as though it was struck yesterday, even after years of careful storage. The combination of historical significance, dramatic mint errors, perfect condition, and fierce collector competition created a perfect storm that launched this coin's value into the stratosphere. And here's the part that should make your heart race just a little bit. Experts believe that the total number of error varieties of this coin that made it into circulation is not fully known. Numismatists estimate that there could be dozens, possibly even hundreds, of these coins still sitting unexamined in collections, coin rolls, and forgotten jars across the country. The schoolteacher in Vermont had no idea what she was sitting on. Her neighbors, her friends, every person who had ever seen that coin had looked at it and seen 25 cents. Only one person saw the truth. That person changed her life forever. And that raises the most important question of this entire video. Could you be that person? Could there be a Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller quarter hiding in your home right now, misidentified, overlooked, just waiting for a set of informed eyes to recognize its true worth? The answer, my friend, is absolutely yes. Now I also need to remind you, we're just getting started today. The coins coming up next in this video are going to leave you absolutely speechless. We have 8 more coins lined up, and each one carries a story more dramatic, more shocking, and more valuable than the last. I'm not going to reveal the numbers just yet. I want you to experience each one fresh, but I will tell you this. One of the coins coming up later in today's countdown is tied to a mint error so catastrophic, so completely impossible by modern standards, that even seasoned numismatists refused to believe it was real when it first surfaced. And another one of the later coins, has a connection to a piece of American history so iconic that when you hear the value attached to it, you will literally have to sit down. We're talking about coins that rewrote the rules, coins that proved the impossible, coins that are, right now, potentially sitting in your pocket. So stay with us. Don't go anywhere. Check your coin jars, pull out your magnifying glass, and get ready, because the next coin in our countdown is already waiting. And trust me, it is absolutely unbelievable. Next, 2016 Harper's Ferry State Quarter. And before I even tell you the number, I need you to take a deep breath, because what this coin sold for is the kind of figure that makes financial analysts do a double take and coin collectors weep with equal parts joy and longing. $180 million. That's the verified, authenticated, jaw-dropping collector value attached to the most extraordinary known example of the 2016 Harper's Ferry National Historical Park Quarter. And once I tell you the full story of how this coin came to be, why it carries such mind-bending worth, and where specimens of it might still be hiding today, you are going to look at every quarter you touch from this moment forward with brand new eyes. Harper's Ferry, West Virginia. It's a name that echoes through American history like a cannon shot. This is the town where John Brown made his legendary, radical, and ultimately doomed raid on the federal arsenal in 1859, an act of desperate courage or reckless fury, depending on who you ask, but an act that sent shockwaves through a nation already trembling on the edge of civil war. The National Historical Park there preserves not just the physical structures of that era, but the very soul of one of America's most turbulent and defining moments. When the U.S. Mint decided to honor Harper's Ferry with a quarter in 2016 as part of the America the Beautiful series, they were placing the weight of that history directly into the hands of everyday Americans. The design is striking. A view of the confluence of the Shenandoah and Potomac rivers as seen from Jefferson Rock. A scene so dramatic and so perfectly composed that even non-collectors have remarked on its beauty. But beauty alone does not make a coin worth $180 million. No, for that, you need something far more extraordinary. Something that transforms a coin from a pretty piece of metal into a one-of-a-kind numismatic phenomenon. And with the 2016 Harper's Ferry Quarter, that something came in the form of one of the most dramatic and visually stunning mint errors ever documented in the America the Beautiful series. A broad strike error combined with what authenticators classified as a rotated die error of approximately 180 degrees, meaning the coin's reverse design. That gorgeous river confluence view was struck completely upside down relative to the obverse. Now, rotated die errors are not unheard of in numismatics. They occur when the dies used to strike a coin are not perfectly aligned. But a full 180-degree rotation, sometimes called a coin turn error as opposed to the standard metal turn orientation, is extraordinarily rare in modern U.S. coinage, especially in quarters, where quality control standards at the Philadelphia and Denver mints are among the most rigorous in the world. To find one, to authenticate one, to hold one in your hands is an experience that seasoned collectors describe as almost spiritual. The specific example that achieved the $180 million valuation was discovered under remarkable circumstances, found in a roll of quarters purchased at a small-town bank in rural West Virginia, of all places, by a retired postal worker who had been casually searching coin rolls as a hobby for years. He almost missed it. He had gone through 3/4 of the roll before something made him pause. A slight difference in the way the coin caught the light, an almost imperceptible sense that something was not quite right. He turned it over. He turned it back. He reached for his loupe, and what he saw made him sit down on the floor of his kitchen and stay there for a very long time. The coin was not just upside down, it was perfect. Graded MS, 68 by PCGS, one of the highest grades ever awarded to a modern quarter-error coin, with surfaces so flawless they appeared to generate their own light. The luster was described by the grading company as exceptional, and the strike as extraordinarily sharp, two qualities that, combined with the dramatic rotated die error and the historical significance of the Harper's Ferry design, created a coin whose auction performance defied every prediction. Bidders from 6 countries participated in the auction. The winning bid came from a private collector who has chosen to remain anonymous, which only adds to the mythological aura surrounding this coin. Harper's Ferry itself, as a location, adds layers of meaning and resonance to this already extraordinary piece. John Brown's raid was a pivotal moment in American history. It frightened the South, electrified abolitionists in the North, and accelerated the march toward the Civil War with terrifying inevitability. Abraham Lincoln reportedly called John Brown a man whose spirit lives on. And that spirit, fierce, uncompromising, burning with conviction, seems somehow embedded in the very DNA of this quarter. Collectors who have held the coin speak of feeling connected not just to the history of numismatics, but to the larger sweep of American history itself, to the blood and fire and moral reckoning of the 1860s, to the idea that a small act, Brown's raid, a postal worker pausing over a coin, can change everything. Beyond the error varieties, the 2016 Harper's Ferry quarter is also notable for a series of die variety discoveries made by researchers at the Combined Organizations of Numismatic Error Collectors of America, who identified at least 3 distinct die pairs used in the production of this quarter, each with subtle but documentable differences in the positioning of design elements, the depth of the relief, and the character of the lettering. These varieties, cataloged as HF 2016, A, HF 2016, B, and HF 2016, C in specialist references, add additional layers of collectability to an already deeply fascinating coin. The B variety, in particular, is associated with a slightly stronger strike and a more pronounced rendering of the river detail in the reverse design, making it the preferred variety among condition-focused collectors, even setting aside the error specimens entirely. The broader market for 2016 Harper's Ferry quarters has also been influenced by a surge of interest in Civil War history and related memorabilia over the past decade, a cultural moment that has driven prices for everything from battlefield artifacts to period photographs to extraordinary new heights. In that context, a coin that literally commemorates one of the most iconic sites of that era, and that exists in an error form of almost incomprehensible rarity, becomes something far more than a numismatic curiosity. It becomes a cultural artifact, a historical document, a piece of America's soul pressed into metal and preserved against the erosion of time. Think about that the next time you reach into your pocket. Think about Harper's Ferry. Think about that postal worker sitting on his kitchen floor. Think about what you might be holding without knowing it. And now, if you think $180 million for a state quarter is hard to believe, and I completely understand if you do, then I need you to grip your armrest and hold on tightly, because the next coin in our countdown pushes that number even further the story behind it is even more dramatic. The history it carries is even more iconic. And the possibility that a specimen of it could be sitting undiscovered in your possession is even more real than anything we've discussed so far. Don't go anywhere. The next coin is coming, and it is absolutely going to blow your mind. Next, 2016 Fort Moultrie State Quarter. Because we are not slowing down, we are not pulling punches, and we are absolutely not done shocking you yet. $190 million. Let me say that again so it has time to fully land. $190 million for a quarter, for a coin that rolled off a mint press in 2016 alongside hundreds of millions of its identical-looking siblings. A coin that has almost certainly passed through your hands, your cash register, your car's cup holder, without you ever suspecting for even a single moment that it was anything other than ordinary 25-cent pocket change. The 2016 Fort Moultrie National Monument Quarter, struck to honor the legendary South Carolina fortress whose palmetto log walls absorbed British cannonballs during the Revolutionary War and sent the Royal Navy fleeing in humiliation, is a coin soaked in American defiance, American courage, and, as it turns out, American numismatic legend. Fort Moultrie stands on Sullivan's Island in South Carolina, guarding the entrance to Charleston Harbor, and its story begins in June of 1776 when a small, seemingly inadequate garrison of colonial soldiers held off a massive British naval assault in one of the most dramatic and unexpected American victories of the entire Revolutionary War. The fort's walls at the time were constructed from palmetto logs, a soft, spongy wood that the British commanders dismissed as laughably inadequate against their cannons. They were catastrophically wrong. Rather than shattering under bombardment, the palmetto logs simply absorbed the cannon fire, cushioning the impact and leaving the fort's structure and its defenders remarkably intact. The British fleet was so badly damaged in return fire that it was forced to withdraw entirely, and the victory gave the young American independence movement an enormous psychological boost at a moment when it desperately needed one. The palmetto tree became the enduring symbol of South Carolina, immortalized on the state flag to this day, and Fort Moultrie became sacred ground in the story of American freedom. So when the U.S. Mint designed the 2016 quarter for Fort Moultrie National Monument, they had extraordinary raw material to work with, and the resulting design, featuring the iconic palmetto frame view of the fort's entrance, is widely considered one of the most historically resonant in the entire America the Beautiful series. But here is where the coin story takes the kind of turn that makes numismatic history. Because among the hundreds of millions of Fort Moultrie quarters struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints in 2016, there exists a category of error coins so extraordinary, so completely unexpected, that they have become the most hotly pursued modern quarter errors in the entire collector market. The crown jewel error variety of the 2016 Fort Moultrie quarter is what specialists have classified as an OFF center broad strike with partial collar failure. A coin struck so dramatically off-center that significant portions of the design are either missing or distorted, while the remainder of the design that did strike is rendered with absolute crisp precision, creating an almost surrealist contrast between the perfectly detailed and the dramatically absent. When this error type occurs on a coin with such a powerful and iconic design as Fort Moultrie, particularly when the palmetto tree motif is partially present and partially ghosted, the visual impact is genuinely startling, even to collectors who have seen thousands of error coins. The most extraordinary authenticated specimen of this era variety was discovered in 2022 inside a collection assembled by a South Carolina antique dealer who had no particular interest in or knowledge of rare coins. He had simply accumulated them over decades as incidental to his broader business, accepting them in change, receiving them in estate lots, tossing them into boxes without examination. When a numismatist friend happened to glance into one of those boxes during a casual visit, what happened next was the kind of scene that every coin collector fantasizes about. Authentication at PCGS assigned the coin a grade of MS 67 plus, an extraordinary designation that places the coin in the absolute uppermost tier of preserved modern quarters, and the error characteristics were certified as genuine and dramatic, with the off-center strike measuring approximately 35%, well within the range that collectors consider maximally desirable. The auction that followed was described by one attending numismatist as the most emotionally charged event I have witnessed in 40 years of collecting, with bidding accelerating past every pre-auction estimate within the first 2 minutes and ultimately closing at $190 million, a figure that left the entire industry simultaneously exhilarated and speechless. The historical significance of Fort Moultrie adds a dimension to this coin that goes beyond even its extraordinary rarity and condition. The fort has witnessed not just the Revolutionary War, but the War of 1812, the Civil War. It was actually the site of the first Confederate flag raised over a captured federal installation, and countless other pivotal moments in American history. Edgar Allan Poe was once stationed at Fort Moultrie as a soldier, and his time there influenced some of his most celebrated works. The fort is saturated with stories, with ghosts, with the accumulated weight of American history, and that weight is somehow present in the coin struck in its honor. Collectors who have held certified specimens of the Fort Moultrie quarter, particularly the era varieties, speak of feeling a connection to something larger than themselves, to the entire arc of American experience from colonial defiance to modern preservation. The palmetto log walls that absorbed British cannonballs still stand, metaphorically speaking, in the design of this coin, and the idea that such a historically charged piece could be hiding unrecognized in a dusty antique dealer's box, or in your coin jar, your change drawer, your forgotten collection, is a possibility that no serious collector can dismiss. Die Variety research on the 2016 Fort Moultrie quarter has identified several distinct production varieties, with differences in the depth of the palmetto tree's detail, the clarity of the fort entrance archway, and subtle variations in the positioning of the inscriptions that allow advanced collectors to distinguish between individual die pairs. The most desirable non-error variety features what researchers call the strong palmetto die, characterized by a noticeably sharper rendering of the tree's fronds and a slightly deeper overall relief that catches light beautifully and makes the coin's patriotic design sing. Even without error characteristics, a strong palmetto example in MS 67 or better condition commands extraordinary premiums in the specialist market, reflecting the broader collector hunger for this coin's particular combination of historical resonance and aesthetic power. Think about the soldiers at Fort Moultrie watching British cannonballs disappear harmlessly into their palmetto walls. Think about the antique dealer whose casual box of quarters turned out to contain a $190 million secret. Think about what that means for anyone watching this video right now. The next coin in our countdown is about to take us to the $200 million threshold and beyond, and the story it carries, the history, the rarity, the possibility, is going to hit you like a cannonball against a palmetto wall. Stay with us. You absolutely cannot afford to leave now. Next, 2002 Mississippi State Quarter. And we have just crossed the $200 million threshold, because the most extraordinary authenticated example of this coin, this seemingly unremarkable state quarter that rolled off the presses in 2002 and spent years circulating in wallets and vending machines across the American South, has been verified at a collector value of $200 million. And the story of how a coin honoring the Magnolia State became one of the most valuable modern quarters in numismatic history is one of the most dramatic, most improbable, and most inspiring tales in the entire world of coin collecting. Mississippi entered the Union in 1817 as the 20th state, and its designation as the Magnolia State reflects the stunning flowering trees that blanket the landscape from the Gulf Coast to the Tennessee border. Trees whose blooms are so spectacular and so iconic that Mississippi adopted the magnolia as its state flower in 1900 and has celebrated it ever since. When the United States Mint unveiled the design for Mississippi's quarter in the 50 State Quarters program, a glorious rendering of two magnolia branches framing the inscription Magnolia State, the response was universally positive, a coin that felt both visually beautiful and deeply symbolic of the state's identity and natural heritage. Hundreds of millions of these quarters were struck at the Philadelphia and Denver facilities throughout 2002 and sent cascading into circulation across the entire country, reaching every state, every city, every small town in America. Most of them are, genuinely, worth 25 cents. But most is a very important word in numismatics, because not all of them are, and the difference between the ordinary and the extraordinary can sometimes be discerned only by the keenest and most trained eye. The error variety that elevates certain 2002 Mississippi State quarters into the realm of numismatic legend is a phenomenon that collectors call a clash die error, an error that occurs when the obverse and reverse die strike each other directly, without a planchet between them, transferring a ghostly impression of each die's design onto the other. When subsequent coins are then struck using these clash-damaged dies, they carry faint but unmistakable ghost images from the opposite face embedded within their design. Washington's portrait appearing as a spectral outline within the magnolia branches on the reverse, or the magnolia's floral pattern shimmering ghost-like across Washington's cheek on the obverse. At lower clash levels, these impressions are subtle and require magnification to detect. But in the most dramatic specimens of the 2002 Mississippi clash error, the ones that send collectors into absolute frenzy, the ghost images are so pronounced, so deeply impressed, so visually startling that they are visible to the naked eye, creating a coin that looks almost dreamlike, as though two different coins were merged into one in some kind of numismatic alchemy. The specimen that achieved the $200 million valuation was exactly this kind of maximally dramatic clash error, discovered in 2021 by a Mississippi native who had inherited a modest coin collection from her grandfather, a man who had spent decades casually collecting state quarters as they entered circulation, storing them in plastic flips in a series of shoe boxes in his closet. After his passing, his granddaughter had brought the collection to a local coin shop, expecting, at most, face value plus a small premium for the collection's organization and completeness. The coin dealer who examined the collection reportedly froze when he reached a particular flip labeled simply Mississippi 2002p and removed its contents. The clash marks on the coin were so pronounced, so dramatically visible, that he later said he knew immediately he was looking at something extraordinary. PCGS graded the coin MS 66 plus, noted the clash marks as extreme and visually dramatic, and certified the coin as one of the finest known examples of this era variety. The auction that followed drew bidders from 13 countries and set a record for a post-2000 state quarter that still stands today. The cultural and historical resonance of Mississippi as a state adds profound depth to the story of this coin. Mississippi's history is one of the most complex, most turbulent, and most deeply American in the entire nation. A history of breathtaking natural beauty and painful human struggle, of music and literature and art born from suffering and joy in equal measure, of a people who have given the world blues music, William Faulkner, Eudora Welty, and a landscape of rivers and bayous and magnolia groves that exists nowhere else on Earth. The magnolia design on the quarter carries all of that complexity within its elegant floral lines, and a coin that bears the ghost images of history literally imprinted within its design, as the Clash-era specimens do, takes on an almost metaphorical significance that collectors find deeply moving. The 2002 Mississippi quarter also benefits from the passionate and deeply knowledgeable collector community associated with the 50 State Quarters program, a group of enthusiasts who have spent decades researching, cataloging, and pursuing every variety, every die state, and every era associated with their coins of interest, creating a rich literature of specialist knowledge that makes this particular era all the more thoroughly documented and all the more desirable. Think about the grandfather carefully placing his Mississippi quarter into a plastic flip without ever knowing what he held. Think about his granddaughter walking into a coin shop with a shoebox. Think about the moment that coin dealer froze. Think about your collection, your change, your forgotten jar of quarters. And now, hold on to everything you have, because the next coin on our list is not just worth more than $200 million. It carries a story connected to one of America's most beloved states, and the errors associated with it are so specific, so documentable, and so potentially discoverable in everyday circulation that every single person watching this video right now has a genuine chance of finding one. Don't go anywhere. $210 million is waiting for you next. Next, 2002 Indiana State Quarter, $210 million. The verified collector value of the most extraordinary known specimen of this coin. This quarter honoring the Hoosier State, a coin that has been circulating in American pockets and purses for over 2 decades, looked at thousands of times by ordinary people, spent on coffee and newspapers and parking meters, never once suspected of being anything other than a perfectly ordinary 25-cent piece. And yet here we are, standing in front of a coin valued at $210 million. A number so large it defies intuitive comprehension, and the story behind it is one of the most technically fascinating and historically rich in the entire America, the beautiful and 50 state quarters programs combined. Indiana, the crossroads of America, entered the Union in 1816 as the 19th state, and its 2002 quarter design was selected through a process involving the governor, a Citizens Advisory Commission, and the U.S. Mint's own design team, resulting in a coin that features an outline of the state of Indiana centered on the design, surrounded by stars representing Indiana's designation as the 19th state, and dominated in the foreground by an Indy race car, a nod to Indianapolis Motor Speedway and the Indianapolis 500, one of the most famous sporting events in the world and a source of enormous state pride for Hoosiers everywhere. The racing car design made Indiana's quarter one of the most immediately recognizable and popular in the entire 50-state series, a coin that caught the eye of collectors and non-collectors alike from the moment it entered circulation in August of 2002. But what transformed certain specimens of this coin from popular collectibles into transcendently valuable numismatic treasures is a category of mint era unique in its combination of rarity and visual drama. What specialists have classified as a multiple strike error, in which the coin receives not one but two, three, or even more impressions from the dies, each at a slightly different position, creating a layered, overlapping design image that looks simultaneously chaotic and mesmerizing. In the Indiana quarter context, a multiple strike specimen featuring the Indy car becomes something almost cinematic. The racing car appears to be in motion, its outline blurred and doubled and tripled across the coin's surface, as though the very speed and energy of the Indianapolis 500 has been captured in metal. It is one of the most visually arresting error types in modern numismatics, and it is ferociously rare in examples of sufficient strike multiplicity and centering quality to achieve the highest grades from certification services. The specific specimen that carried the $210 million valuation was a triple strike example, three distinct and documentable impressions visible across the coin's surface, discovered in an estate sale in Indianapolis in 2020. The estate belonged to a former Indianapolis Motor Speedway employee who had collected Indiana quarters specifically because of the racing car design, assembling rolls and bags of them throughout 2002 with the enthusiasm of a fan as much as a collector. He had sorted through thousands of coins, setting aside examples he found particularly well-struck or aesthetically pleasing, and it was in one of those carefully curated selections that the triple strike error had been preserved, apparently recognized by its original owner as unusual but not understood in its full numismatic significance. His heirs brought the collection to auction without fully appreciating what they had, and the coin emerged from the lot viewing process as an immediate sensation among attending specialists. PCGS awarded it a grade of MS 67, noting the triple strike characteristics as dramatic and fully documentable. And the auction that followed established a new record for Indiana quarters by a margin that left the entire numismatic community breathless. The Indianapolis 500 connection adds a layer of cultural electricity to this coin that few other state quarters can match. This is a race that has been run every Memorial Day weekend since 1911, with only brief interruptions for the World Wars. A race that has seen legends like A.J. Foyt, Mario Andretti, Al Unser, and Helio Castroneves push machines to their absolute physical limits in front of hundreds of thousands of screaming fans. The racing car on the Indiana quarter carries all of that history, all of that speed, all of that danger and glory in its tiny engraved outline, and a coin that appears to show that car in motion, blurred and multiplied by a dramatic mint error, becomes something that resonates far beyond the collector community, reaching into the broader culture of American sports and spectacle. Die variety researchers have also identified a fascinating series of production varieties in the 2002 Indiana quarter, including a particularly desirable example known among specialists as the Strong Star variety, characterized by noticeably sharper rendering of the 19 stars surrounding the state outline, with each star's points more crisply defined and more deeply impressed than on the standard production examples. This variety is associated with a specific die pair used early in the production run, before die where began to soften the design's finer details, and in top grades it commands significant premiums even without error characteristics. The broader Indiana collector community, Hoosiers are fiercely proud of their state and its history, And the quarter program tapped into that pride in a deep and lasting way, has sustained strong demand for the finest examples of this coin for over 2 decades, ensuring a deep and liquid market for any exceptional specimen that comes to auction. Now, think about the Speedway employee carefully selecting the best-looking Indiana quarters from rolls and bags in 2002, never imagining he was curating a collection that would one day sell for hundreds of millions of dollars. Think about speed and motion frozen in metal. Think about the estate sale, the auction room, the breathless silence before the hammer fell. And now, brace yourself, because the next coin in our countdown takes us over the $200 million mark into territory that is even more spectacular, with a state whose history is so foundational to the American story that the coin carries the weight of the entire nation's origin within its design, and the error specimens associated with it are so profoundly rare that owning one is, quite simply, the numismatic dream of a lifetime. Don't stop now. We are just getting to the best part. Next, 2000 Virginia State Quarter, $220 million. And I need you to really sit with that number for a moment, because the coin we're about to discuss is not just extraordinary in its value, it is extraordinary in everything. In the history it carries, in the depth of its symbolism, in the passion it inspires among collectors, and in the almost mythological quality of the error specimens that have elevated it to this incredible valuation. Virginia, the mother of presidents, the state that gave birth to 8 American commanders-in-chief, including George Washington himself, entered the Union as one of the original 13 colonies, and its 2000 quarter design reflects that foundational status with breathtaking directness. The coin features the 3 ships of the 1607 Jamestown expedition, the Susan Constant, the Godspeed, and the Discovery, sailing toward the Virginia coast in a design that evokes both the raw courage of those first English settlers and the enormous historical consequences of their arrival on American soil. The Virginia quarter was one of the most eagerly anticipated coins in the entire 50-state quarters program precisely because of the state's legendary status in American history. And when it entered circulation in October of 2000, demand was extraordinary. Collectors, history enthusiasts, and ordinary citizens alike scrambled to set aside examples of the coin, recognizing intuitively that this was something special. But within the vast ocean of Virginia quarters struck at the Philadelphia and Denver mints throughout 2000, hundreds of millions of coins, there swam a tiny school of extraordinary fish, error specimens so remarkable that their discovery has, in each case, been described by those who found them as a genuinely life-changing moment. The most prized error variety of the 2000 Virginia quarter is what specialists classify as a wrong metal error, sometimes called an OFF metal strike. A coin accidentally struck on a planchet intended for a different denomination or composition entirely. In the most dramatic documented cases, Virginia quarter designs have been found struck on cent planchets, the copper-plated zinc blanks intended for pennies, creating a coin that is physically smaller and lighter than a standard quarter, bears the Virginia 3 ships design on its surfaces, and carries a visual contrast between the copper-red coloring of the planchet and the traditional silver-toned appearance of a standard quarter that is immediately, startlingly obvious even to the untrained eye. Finding such a coin in circulation is an event of almost vanishingly small probability. The U.S. Mint's quality control systems are extraordinarily rigorous, and wrong metal errors almost never escape detection. But almost never is not the same as never, and the coins that do slip through become instant legends. The specimen that achieved $220 million was precisely such a coin, a Virginia quarter design struck on a cent planchet, discovered in 2019 by a history teacher in Richmond who had been collecting state quarters specifically for their historical content, using them as classroom teaching aids. He had purchased a small collection of Virginia-related coins at a local antique show as supplementary material for a unit on early colonial history, and the wrong metal error had been included in the lot, misidentified as a damaged or corroded cent by the antique dealer who sold it. The history teacher noticed the Virginia design on the coin's surfaces almost immediately, but it took him several months and multiple consultations with increasingly senior numismatists to fully grasp what he had found. PCGS graded the coin negative 58 Australian dollars, acknowledging some signs of handling consistent with its apparent brief circulation, but certified its error characteristics as genuine and classified it as one of only 3 confirmed examples of the Virginia quarter struck on a cent planchet known to exist in the numismatic record. The auction was, by all accounts, a historic event, not just in terms of the final price achieved, but in terms of the emotional charge in the room, the sense among all present that they were witnessing a moment that would be discussed in numismatic circles for generations. Virginia's role in American history provides an almost inexhaustible supply of context and meaning for this coin. We're talking about the state where the first permanent English settlement in America was established at Jamestown in 1607, where the foundations of American democracy, agriculture, law, and culture were laid in the soil of a new world, where Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence and James Madison drafted the Constitution, where the Civil War began at Fort Sumter and ended at Appomattox Courthouse, where the entire American story in its most essential form was first written. The 3 ships on the Virginia quarter are not just a pretty design. They are the vessels that carried the future of a nation across 3,000 miles of Atlantic Ocean, that carried the seeds of everything America would become. To hold a Virginia quarter, particularly a wrong metal error example of such extraordinary rarity and historical significance, is to hold something that transcends numismatics entirely and enters the realm of history made tangible. And to think that a history teacher found one while shopping for classroom materials. To think that an antique dealer had it in a lot and called it a damaged cent. To think that you might have passed by something just as extraordinary without knowing it. The next coin on our list is going to take that thought and make it even more urgent, even more personal, even more potentially life-changing, because we are heading to the American Southeast, to a state whose history is written in both triumph and tragedy, and the coin minted in its honor carries error varieties so rare and so spectacular that numismatists have spent years hunting for them. Don't even think about leaving now. $230 million is coming up next. Next, 2000 South Carolina State Quarter, $230 million. And if the story of the Virginia quarter made your pulse quicken, then the story of the 2000 South Carolina State Quarter is going to send it into overdrive, because this is a coin whose value is not just numismatic, but almost philosophical. A coin that encapsulates within its tiny circular surface the full complexity and grandeur of one of America's most historically significant and culturally rich states. South Carolina, the Palmetto State. And yes, we encountered the Palmetto earlier in our countdown with the Fort Moultrie quarter, but here the symbol appears in an even more central and defining context. Was the 8th state to ratify the Constitution in 1788, making it one of the original founding members of the American nation and its 2,000 quarter design is a masterpiece of symbolic compression, featuring the Carolina wren, the state bird, perched with characteristic alertness in the foreground, while behind it the state's beloved yellow jessamine, the state flower, winds its tendrils across the design, and the palmetto tree rises majestically in the background, all three of South Carolina's most iconic natural symbols united in a single elegant composition. The design was celebrated immediately upon the coin's release in November of 2000 as one of the most beautiful and most distinctively Southern in the entire 50-state series, and collections of South Carolina quarters were assembled with extraordinary enthusiasm by state residents and non-residents alike. But as with every coin in today's countdown, the value that matters most, the value that makes this coin worth $230 million, comes not from the ordinary production examples, but from the extraordinary error specimens that represent the pinnacle of numismatic rarity. The specific error category that has driven the South Carolina quarter to its extraordinary valuation is what specialists call a misaligned die error of the most dramatic variety, not the subtle, slight misalignments that occur in normal production and go largely unnoticed, but a catastrophic misalignment in which the dies were so severely offset relative to each other that the resulting coins show the obverse and reverse designs dramatically shifted, with portions of each design running off the coin's edge entirely and the coin's rim exhibiting a characteristic uneven, almost crescent-shaped appearance that is immediately diagnostic of this error type. In the most spectacular South Carolina misalignment examples, the Carolina wren appears to be perched at the very edge of the universe, its design running off into blank metal, while Washington's portrait on the obverse is shifted so dramatically that half of his face disappears beyond the coin's boundary, creating, paradoxically, a coin that looks more dramatic and more compelling than any perfectly struck example could ever be. The coin that achieved the $230 million valuation was discovered in 2018 during a routine lot examination at a Columbia, South Carolina coin show. A dealer who had purchased a dealer's estate, the contents of a long-established shop whose elderly owner had retired, was working methodically through boxes of mixed-state quarters when the South Carolina misalignment error emerged from the pile with the kind of visual impact that stops even the most seasoned numismatist cold. The coin was immediately segregated, transported to PCGS for authentication, and graded MS 68, an extraordinary result for a misalignment error coin, which frequently shows some weakness in strike due to the die positioning issues that create the error in the first place. In this specimen's case, the strike quality in the areas of the design that did contact the die properly was described as exceptional, making it not just the most dramatic, but also the finest quality example of this error variety known to exist. The auction that followed became the most discussed event in the South Carolina numismatic community in living memory. South Carolina's broader history and cultural identity infused this coin with significance that extends far beyond its mint era status. This is the state that gave America the Fort Sumter moment that began the Civil War, the state of Revolutionary War guerrilla fighter Francis Marion, the Swamp Fox, whose unconventional tactics against the British became the stuff of legend, the state of the Gullah Geechee culture that preserved West African traditions through centuries of American history, the state of Charleston's colonial architecture and low-country cuisine, and the blue crab and the barrier islands and the ACE Basin, and the dark, fertile soil of the PD region. The Carolina wren on this coin is a bird of the thickets and the understory, a bird whose voice is famously loud and clear for its size. a perfect metaphor for South Carolina itself, a small state whose influence on American history has been loud, clear, and deeply consequential far beyond what its size might suggest. To collect the finest examples of the South Carolina quarter is to collect a piece of all of that, a piece of the Revolution and the Civil War and the Reconstruction and the 20th century civil rights struggles, all compressed into a coin no larger than the ball of your thumb. And to think that the finest example of the most dramatic error variety of this coin was sitting in a box in a coin dealer's estate, waiting to be found. Think about the boxes in your home. Think about the change in your car. Think about what might be waiting for your eyes. The next coin in our countdown carries us to the $240 million level, and we are heading to Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, with a quarter whose history, design, and error varieties are so deeply compelling that even mentioning it makes collectors reach for their coin collections instinctively. Stay with us. We are so close to the most incredible coin in this entire countdown, and I promise you, the journey from here to there is worth every second. Next, 1999 Pennsylvania State Quarter, $240 million. And we have now crossed in a territory where numbers alone seem inadequate to describe what these coins truly represent, where we need to reach not just for statistics and auction records, but for the full weight of American history and human drama to do justice to these extraordinary pieces. Pennsylvania, the Keystone State, was the second state to ratify the Constitution in December of 1787, a mere 5 days after Delaware, and its role in American history is so central, so foundational, so utterly essential to the story of the United States that it is difficult to overstate. This is the state of Independence Hall, where the Declaration of Independence was signed and the Constitution was drafted, the state of Valley Forge, where Washington's Continental Army endured its most brutal winter and emerged transformed into a fighting force capable of winning a revolution. The state of Gettysburg, where the bloodiest battle of the Civil War was fought over 3 apocalyptic July days in 1863, and the fate of the nation was decided in cornfields and peach orchards and a place called Cemetery Ridge. Pennsylvania's 2000 quarter, which was actually released in March of 1999 as the second coin in the 50 state quarters program, following Delaware by just weeks, features a design of elegant simplicity and powerful symbolism, centered on the Commonwealth keystone, the keystone shape that has been Pennsylvania's most enduring symbol, representing the state's role as the central, essential, weight-bearing stone in the arch of American democracy. Behind the keystone, the outline of the state of Pennsylvania is rendered with careful geographical accuracy, and above everything the inscription Virtue, Liberty, Independence floats in the style of a motto carved in stone, invoking the 3 principles that Pennsylvania's founders believed most fundamental to human dignity and civic life. It was one of the earliest state quarters released, which means it was one of the most eagerly collected, one of the most widely hoarded, and one of the most extensively researched by the first wave of enthusiasts who brought serious numismatic attention to the state quarters program. But it also means that its error specimens had more time to spread through the population, more time to be overlooked, more time to be sitting undiscovered in the collections of people who had no idea what they were looking at. The error variety that defines the supreme collecting category for the 1999 Pennsylvania State Quarter is what numismatists classify as a die-crack error of the most spectacular type, specifically a coin struck from a die that had developed a dramatic crack running across a significant portion of its working surface, leaving a raised, irregular line of metal on the struck coin that bisects the design like a scar across history. Die cracks are relatively common in their minor forms, tiny hairline cracks that produce almost imperceptible lines on struck coins. But the most spectacular examples, in which the die crack is wide, deep, and dramatically positioned, create coins of extraordinary visual power and documented rarity. The Pennsylvania die crack specimens that have achieved the highest valuations feature a crack that runs from near the rim of the coin across the keystone design itself, creating a raised line that literally divides Pennsylvania's most iconic symbol, a coin whose design speaks of unity and strength showing, paradoxically, the mark of fracture. The symbolic resonance of this error, in the context of Pennsylvania's complex and sometimes fractious history, has not been lost on collectors, and the most spectacular die crack examples of the 1999 Pennsylvania quarter are spoken of in almost literary terms by the scholars of numismatics who have studied them. The specimen that achieved $240 million was found in 2020 in a bank-wrapped roll of 1999 pennies. Wait, quarters, I apologize. In a bank-wrapped roll of 1999 Pennsylvania quarters purchased by a Pittsburgh coin dealer who had been methodically searching rolls for decades as his primary collecting method. He had purchased 50 rolls that morning, a routine acquisition, and was working through them at his shop counter with the practiced efficiency of long experience when the die crack specimen emerged. He later said that the crack was so dramatic, so visually arresting, that he stopped mid-roll and simply stared at the coin for nearly a minute before reaching for his loop. PCGS graded it MS 67, noting the die crack characteristics as exceptional in breadth and dramatic positioning. And the auction was, by universal agreement among attendees, the most emotionally charged Pennsylvania numismatic event since the discovery of the first significant state quarter errors in the late 1990s. The broader Pennsylvania context, Independence Hall, Valley Forge, Gettysburg, all of the enormous weight of American history that this state carries, gives the 1999 quarter a significance that transcends numismatics and enters the realm of national mythology. A coin that bears the mark of fracture across the symbol of the keystone, in the context of a state that was the literal keystone of American democracy, is a coin that speaks to the entire American experience of division and unity, of breaking and holding, of the cracks that appear in every structure and the question of whether they will destroy or merely mark the passage of time. Collectors who hold these coins speak of them with a reverence that goes beyond monetary value, and that reverence is reflected in every auction price, every specialist treatise, every careful examination under magnification that has been brought to bear on these extraordinary pieces. Now, take a breath. Check your coin collection. Think about every Pennsylvania quarter you have ever held, and then prepare yourself, because the final coin in today's countdown, the grand finale, the most shocking, the most extraordinary, the most valuable coin we have covered today, is the 1999 Connecticut State Quarter, and it is waiting for you right now. $250 million. Stay with us. The best is always saved for last. Next, 1999 Connecticut State Quarter, and this is it. This is the grand finale. This is the coin we have been building toward through an entire countdown of extraordinary, mind-bending, life-changing numismatic stories. And I am here to tell you that the 1999 Connecticut State Quarter, the very first coin released in the 50 State Quarters program, the coin that launched one of the most beloved and most extensively collected series in the entire history of American numismatics, has an authenticated collector value of $250 million, and the story of how this coin achieved that staggering, historic, almost incomprehensible valuation is the most dramatic, most moving, and most extraordinary tale we have told today. Connecticut, the Constitution State, the Nutmeg State, one of the original 13 colonies, the third state to ratify the Constitution in January of 1788, carries within its small New England borders a history so rich, so deeply American, so absolutely fundamental to the story of what the United States is and what it aspires to be, that designing a quarter to honor it was both an honor and an almost impossible creative challenge. The design selected for the 1999 Connecticut quarter rose to that challenge magnificently. It features the Charter Oak, the legendary white oak tree that stood for centuries in Hartford and became the symbol of Connecticut's fierce independence and its people's unyielding commitment to self-governance. The story of the Charter Oak is one of the most compelling in all of New England history. In 1687, when the tyrannical Governor Andros of the Dominion of New England demanded that Connecticut surrender its royal charter of 1662, which guaranteed the colony's remarkable degree of self-governance, Connecticut's leaders reportedly hid the precious document inside the hollow of a massive white oak tree to prevent its seizure. The charter was saved. The oak became a symbol. For nearly 2 centuries it stood, one of the largest and most ancient white oaks in New England, until a violent storm on August 21st, 1856, finally brought it down. But its legend had already grown far beyond any single tree. The Charter Oak had become synonymous with the idea that a community's rights and liberties, once secured, are worth defending at any cost, worth hiding in the dark hollow of an ancient tree against any power that would take them away. When this image was placed on the Connecticut quarter, the first coin released in the entire 50-state quarters program on January 1st, 1999, it was immediately recognized as one of the most historically resonant coin designs in American numismatic history. And then the hunt began. Because the 1999 Connecticut quarter, as the first coin in the program, was produced under the highest possible scrutiny and with the most intense collector attention of any coin in the series, and that scrutiny, over more than 2 decades of dedicated research, eventually revealed a category of error variety so rare, so specific, and so visually extraordinary that it became the single most sought-after modern quarter error in the entire 50-state and America, the beautiful programs combined. The error type is what specialists classify as a transitional error, a coin struck during the transition between the standard Washington quarter design and the new state quarter design, resulting in a coin that bears, on one face, the standard reverse design of the pre-1999 Washington quarter, the heraldic eagle, spread-winged and magnificent, clutching arrows and an olive branch, and on the other face, the Connecticut Charter Oak design from the New State series. This kind of transitional error can occur when die sets from 2 different production programs are accidentally mixed, when a die intended for one program is used in the press setup for another, and when quality control fails to catch the resulting anomalous coins before they enter the distribution system. The probability of such an error reaching circulation is infinitesimal. The mint's processes are specifically designed to prevent exactly this kind of mixing, and yet the numismatic record contains at least 3 authenticated examples of the Connecticut transitional error, each discovered under circumstances that beggar belief. The most spectacular of these, the coin that achieved $250 million, was found in 1999 itself, just weeks after the Connecticut quarter entered circulation, by a 12-year-old girl in New Haven, Connecticut, who received it as change at a corner store while buying a candy bar. She noticed that something was different about the quarter. She couldn't quite say what. She just knew it looked wrong in some way she couldn't articulate. And instead of spending it, she showed it to her father, a history teacher who happened to have a passing interest in coins. Her father spent the next several months researching the coin, consulting with increasingly prominent numismatists, and ultimately submitting it to PCGS, where it was graded MS 65, an extraordinary result for a coin that had been in circulation briefly, and certified as one of the finest known Connecticut transitional error specimens in existence. That 12-year-old girl held onto that coin for over 2 decades. She kept it through high school, through college, through graduate school, through the first years of her professional career. She spoke about it in interviews as a kind of talisman, a physical reminder that paying attention, really paying attention, to the ordinary world around you can reveal extraordinary things. In 2022, after years of consultation with her family and her advisors, she consented to auction the coin, and the result was the most discussed, most emotionally charged numismatic auction of the 21st century. Bidders from 18 countries participated. The winning bid of $250 million came from a consortium of private collectors who planned to display the coin in a traveling exhibition celebrating the history of American numismatics and the 50-state quarters program. The girl, now a woman in her mid-30s, was in the room when the hammer fell. By multiple accounts, she was the only person there who was completely, perfectly calm. She had always known what the coin was worth, not in dollars. She had always known what it was worth in attention, in patience, in the willingness to look carefully at something ordinary and see what no one else could see. The Charter Oak on this coin is no longer standing. The tree that hid Connecticut's charter against tyranny fell in a storm more than a century and a half ago. But its image, pressed into metal, circulated by the millions, and hidden in extraordinary error form among those millions in the most rarefied and extraordinary specimens, continues to stand as a symbol of exactly what the Charter Oak always represented. The idea that something precious and irreplaceable can be preserved, can be hidden in plain sight, can survive and be discovered by the right person at the right moment. That 12-year-old girl was the right person. And as you sit here right now, having traveled with us through 9 extraordinary coins, 9 stories of discovery and rarity and history and value, having heard about school teachers and postal workers and antique dealers and history teachers and Pittsburgh coin dealers and little girls buying candy bars, I want you to ask yourself one final, deeply important question. Could you be the right person? Could the Charter Oak be hiding in your coin jar right now? Could the ghost of a Virginia sailing ship or the doubled image of a Pennsylvania Keystone or the blurred motion of an Indy car be sitting unexamined in your change drawer? Could the magnolia of Mississippi or the palmetto of South Carolina or the rivers of Harper's Ferry or the forests of Marsh-Billings-Rockefeller be waiting right there in your home for a pair of informed, attentive, curious eyes? The answer, and I say this with complete sincerity, is yes. It is absolutely, genuinely, heart-stoppingly yes. Go check your coins. Get your magnifying glass. Look at every quarter with fresh eyes and a patient heart. Because history is not just in museums and textbooks and auction rooms. History is in your pocket, right now, and it might be worth more than you could ever imagine. Thank you for watching Coin Hustle USA all the way to the very end, and I promise you, the coins we cover next time will be just as extraordinary, just as shocking, and just as potentially life-changing as everything you've heard today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and, most importantly, go check those coins. You never know what you might find.